Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first Instructor Showcase. My name is Peter Satulli. I'm a course director here in the Digital Arts and Design program. I teach the final portfolio class. And this is a unique event for you guys. You get to actually see what some of the instructors do for their career, and they get to share that with you. Are we excited to see some instructors work? Yes? Awesome. Good to hear. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Kira Godnick-Sylvia. She teaches TPL online and graphic principles online. Ladies and gentlemen, Kira.
Good morning, everyone. Look at this gorgeous crowd. Hi. So as Peter said, my name is Kira Godnick-Sylvia. I might not look familiar to many of you because I teach online, but I wanted to share some of my work with you all today. So I did my undergrad locally here at Rollins, and then I took some years off. I won't say how long, and did my graduate work a bit online with a low res in Portland, Oregon at the Pacific Northwest College of Art. So this is an image of me working on my thesis project. A little bit of plaster, a little bit of oil paint, and I am an interdisciplinary artist. So what that means is the concept is what dictates the materials that I use. And people will respond differently to different materials. So this is beneficial because if you are like me and you use pretty things to talk about disturbing things, you can convince your viewers to come in and have a conversation about things that they might not want to talk about, things that are a little bit more uncomfortable. If they're looking at something that might be a little bit more whimsical, like paper cuts or some of the folk art, crochet, macrame, these sort of things, it's a little bit less intimidating if you're working with materials. So as designers, think about how the materials can help with your subject matter. So I want to show you 3 projects that I've worked on today. I've been doing a lot of work with colored pencils, and colored pencils are a more whimsical material. I work a lot with talking about anxiety, depression, things that can be a little uncomfortable for people to talk about. Colored pencils can tend to be a softer blow when a lot of us are looking in a mirror. So this is a really great material to work with. It also creates a lot of really great texture and saturation. Texture and saturation is something that we like to look at, so this is a way to really bring a viewer in to the conversation that you're having. So I want to start out talking a bit about my process. I look at a lot of sources. I use Pinterest, so how many of you have taken Graphic Principles 2 yet? Okay, yeah, so we have you use Pinterest. How many of you have taken typography and page layout yet? All right, yeah, so Pinterest works there as well, so you can see how I use Pinterest as well to gather that material. If you're looking for source photos, I'm taking source photos. If you're worried that your source photo isn't perfect, you have a picture of somebody whose head is turned this way, and you need their head to be turned this way, the arms this way, you need it like that. Don't worry, just get something that's almost right and Frankenstein it all together. So for my Graphic Principles 2 people, you're probably going to recognize a lot of things here: layer masks, folders, naming your layers. All of that needs to be nice and neat and organized when you have this many layers. After I get my picture the way I want it, I use a projector to put it onto my paper to trace out the elements. I'm using really large images here. This is, I think, 30 inches by 40 inches. And then I can start drawing it, which in my house usually involves some cat help. So here is an example of one of my colored pencil pieces. A lot of the work that I do is in layers. So I work with linguistics, how we use language. If anyone's familiar with Jacques Derrida's deconstruction. He looks at how we're working with words. So I think about that a lot. I also think about myths. But you don't have to be a linguistic, you don't have to be familiar with myths in order to get the whole entire piece. So I want to think about all of my viewers. So if you approach the piece and you're just responding to the colors, to the body language, to the flow, to the highlights and the shadows, that's perfectly fine. You're still getting something out of the piece. If you're familiar with Japanese mythology, with the yokai, with the kitsune myth, then you might be getting something else out of the piece. So for those of you that might be familiar with the kitsune was a type of spirit that sometimes would be a little malicious, sometimes just might be a little bit like, Loki, a little mischievous. They would be shapeshifters, so a lot of times they would take a more human form, like beautiful women. There's even stories where they would marry humans and have children. I tend to also use language. So the idea of somebody being foxy or a cool cat or eat like a pig. So how we use animals to represent human characteristics. So again, these are softer blows. And how I can create that in a visual form. If you are familiar with feminist theory, then you're going to get another take on this image. So again, how can we look at our viewers and what their background and what their interests might be and use those for multiple entry points into a piece? So in medieval Japan, there was a belief that any woman, young woman, walking alone, particularly at dusk, was most likely a shape-shifting kitsune. So think about that for a minute. That's a very fascinating belief. The thought that a woman that was bold enough to walk alone by herself couldn't possibly be human. She had to be a shape-shifting fox. So I found that really fascinating, and that was interesting to me and paralleled a lot of the thoughts that were going on in my head and helped me get through a lot of things that were happening right now to me and to my friends, and that inspired me to create this particular piece. And as artists, that's one of the things that we do, right? We help ourselves and the world digest what's going on around us. A repeat client that I have is Burrow Press. They're a local publisher here in Central Florida. Do I have any creative writing students here in the audience? Maybe a few. So if any of you are ever interested in writing, definitely check them out. And having repeat clients is great because you can build up that relationship. There's no surprises. You know what they expect of you, what you expect of them. And I'm primarily doing illustrations for them, book covers and insides, but occasionally I'll do some other things. And a lot of the work that I do is through Illustrator, so all my GR1 people, woo! And you can see in this example of some of my process photos, they'll send me a manuscript, and I'll just start highlighting anything that's visual. I'll start doing sketches on the side. You can see this sketch, it's nothing great. But again, this is just starting to get out ideas as soon as I have them. As soon as I get those ideas, I just start drawing them. And you'll see the finished version of this mushroom cloud sketch in the next slide. But just start sketching. Doesn't have to be pretty. This is not even anything the client's going to see. This is for my own benefit. So don't worry about embarrassing yourself. Just get the idea out. Then I'll start doing a much more detailed version of the sketch, and the one in the middle is something that I'm actually going to then bring into Illustrator and sketch onto that. So let's take a look at some final results here. I actually have for you today the finalized version of the book that you see on the screen. This was a really fun project because it contained 15 short stories from writers in Orlando and 15 short stories from writers in Tampa, so the book had to flip. So this was a really cool project to make, and I also did the inside illustrations through paper cuts. So again, being interdisciplinary works to my benefit. And here is one of the other books that you see up on the screen there. You'll also see up there animations that I worked on with my husband for a book opening. And you see a color pencil piece that I'm working on for a current project. So again, working to your strengths, but also being flexible has its advantages. The last project that I want to talk about is where my fine art and my design came together in a really unique and really exciting way. So this was a project that I worked on for something called Art in Odd Places that happened in 2017. And it was an event that the city put on that allowed art to be in the middle of the city in an unexpected way, downtown Orlando. So you can see some processing photos here. I worked in InDesign and Illustrator, and I cut some things out with a laser cutter. So what this project was, I created a fake organization called the Specular Highlights Institute. It was based on the art movement, the Situationist International, and absurdist theory. And the idea was to create something that was very subtle. So if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it. The idea was to reward people who had their eyes open and who were paying attention. So there were 3 parts to this. There were info fact signs, and I have one of those with me today. So these were up in various places. So these were created in Illustrator. There were signs like if you go to amusement parks and you see signs that say like Kodak moment, stuff like that. It said selfie moments. And there were brochures that were created in Illustrator and InDesign that look like this, that mimicked the airline safety fact cards. And those were placed in 3 different rotating locations in downtown Orlando. But again, they were pretty non-assuming. So if you didn't know what they were or weren't curious about something and didn't stop to read it, you would have easily passed it by, and that was by design. So here they are in the wild. So you can see, really easy, besides the somewhat saturated colors, to pass by this. And if you stop to read these, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. It would be really hard to take them seriously. And again, this is coming from absurdist theory, and that was part of the point. I didn't want anyone to actually misunderstand this as actually giving you real information. So, for instance, if we read this one, it says, "Take a moment to imagine sounds of construction around you. One day on this site, they'll begin construction on a 1-to-1 scale model of the city of Orlando, and they'll do it overnight, so you won't notice a thing." There's no information there. This particular brochure says "Never die alone," and gives you instructions on how to do that, which again tells you nothing. And this pamphlet says, oh, this is also "Never die alone." So if you didn't get the information the first time. But there's one on how to not be poor and how to not get fat. So I wanted to think about the things that people really worry about and to prey on those. But again, the information inside doesn't really say that. So the idea here was to encourage and reward people to open their eyes, to be curious, and to take action. So I want to conclude with this project because I think as students, we're really in an incubator here to take the information that we have and to move forward and to learn and to act. And to think about how we can take that model, that workflow, and once we graduate, to continue to move through life with curiosity and to not beat ourselves up for the information that we didn't know yesterday, but to keep moving forward tomorrow and the day after that. Here's my information if you have any questions or you want to see the rest of my work. But I want to bring to the stage a really talented painter, somebody who I really respect, and I'm really excited that you all are going to get to see his work, Mr. Tony Filippo.
Thanks, Leslie. Alrighty. So, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out to the showcase. My name is Tony Filippo. I'm a lab instructor here at Full Sail in the Digital Arts and Design Department. I work alongside Peter Satullo in the final portfolio class. And outside of Full Sail, I'm a fine artist, and I'm going to discuss some of the paintings from various projects from the past few years that I've done. So as you can see here on stage, I have some of my work. I'm truly inspired by graffiti, Art Nouveau, comics, abstract to geometric art, surrealism, and figurative realism. It's kind of a big combination of things I've kind of learned to put into my work over the course of about 13 years. Essentially, like a lot of you, I think I gravitated to the more popular culture things, you know, as a young kid when I was in high school. But as I went to college, I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, and that kind of really expanded my perception and my overall openness to fine art and just design as well. I love to draw, as you can see, and I love to paint people, plants, animals, insect, armor. I love shape, I love texture, color, and beautiful lighting. These are just things that I have an affinity for, and I want the viewer to share, you know, in these things that I really, truly enjoy visually. Aside from my paintings, as a designer, I maintain 2 websites, my own social media, as well as doing my own videos, branding for myself, and a side project that I do with a really close friend of mine named Monty Montgomery. We have a project called Kaleidoscope, and these are some of the paintings that you see up here where they have the portraits that have the nice, bright, vibrant, geometric backgrounds, really hard edges. That's his work. So. And this is where my design skills have helped me tremendously and given me a lot of freedom and autonomy to do the things that I want to do. Because when I was first graduated out of college, I typically, you know, was just putting a lot of my time into my painting and my drawing, which I think is required if you want to reach a certain level with your work. You know, I think you probably heard the phrase before, you got to put your 10,000 hours in. And who knows, I probably put in a little bit more. I've really dedicated a lot of my time to my craft, and so therefore, a lot of things don't always get picked up as well, right? It's like, so I had an affinity for design, but I didn't have the skill set for it. So over the last, I want to say last 10 years, I wanted to make sure that that was a strength of mine and not just my artwork. I really wanted to push my design skills a little bit more. So now, I'm really kind of at a great place because now when I do my work, I have a bigger vision in mind in terms of how I'm going to use it on my social media and how I'm going to use it on my website. Okay, so again, a little bit about myself. I'm from the Bronx, New York, and that is actually the crest for the Bronx. It's pretty awesome, isn't it? I know you feel that way. So I've been fascinated with visual art since I was a child. My father's abstract drawing and paintings were a huge source of inspiration for me. I just remember being a kid, and my dad, he's Greek, so when I used to run around my grandparents' house, I would see these amazing, like really abstract, bold drawings and paintings of boats and islands and just a lot of really cool stuff. Even till this day, he did some really cool things that I haven't seen from other artists or other people in general. My dad used to do a lot of compositions that had a lot of shape and color, but he would take carpet, because he used to be a carpenter, so he would take carpet and make these shapes and compositions, or paintings technically, with carpet. And I found that really kind of interesting in a visual level, because I had never seen anybody take this kind of furry textile and then use it in this kind of really design-oriented composition as a final piece of artwork. Along with that, movies, cartoons, album covers, graffiti, graphic novels, they later became the motivation for me to go to art school. You know, like I said, a lot of these popular culture things crept into my life, and I think for a good reason. You know, it's what inspired me, it's what kept me visually motivated. And since I love to draw, it was like my main skill, but the one thing I couldn't do that I really, really wanted to do was paint. You know, and I think for a lot of creative people, that's a huge gap. You know, I think there's always this sense of like, I can accomplish an image, but can I bring it to life? You know, and that was for me a big motivation, you know, and I really wanted to do that. And so I would say 1 year outside of high school, I went to Valencia College here, because I actually went to University High School down the road. I had an aunt that was in New York, and she said, hey, you know, why don't you come on up and check out Pratt Institute? They're having an open house. Sure, why not? You know, I'll have to go to New York. Give me a reason. So went to the open house. That was it. I immediately fell in love. I had to go back. So I did. And this is where I received my BFA in communications design. It's a combined degree of graphic design and illustration, which I think is really kind of fortuitous for me, because like I said, I was so focused on the, you know, rendering and the visual format of what I was doing, and not really as concerned with design. And I learned quickly how out of touch and how disassociated I was with it, which was a really kind of great turning point for me as an artist, because I think what it really led to was me understanding my craft a bit more and really getting more out of what I was making. So after I graduated, I did freelance for a number of years before transitioning into fine art. I wasn't somebody that I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I graduated. I thought that I wanted to be an illustrator, and in the final, I guess, semester of my last year, I realized I don't want to be a fine artist. You know, it's a pretty daunting kind of realization, but it was a very awesome moment for me, because it gave me a lot of clarity and it gave me direction. I just knew that I would have to prepare for it. So I gave myself about 3 to 5 years to kind of hone in on my skills before I went and pushed my work and my portfolio out to galleries and different entities that I wanted to work with. And so I've been doing that now for the past 13 years. So I do sell my drawings and paintings. I sell them online, I sell them in galleries, I'll sell them at fairs, I'll sell them wherever basically anybody gives me the opportunity to. My work has been shown all over the US, so from New York to LA, San Diego, Chicago, Detroit, and Miami. If you've ever been down to Art Basel, I've had my work displayed there in Scope, the art fair, for a number of years. It's a really amazing art fair that if you do live in Florida, and if you are in Florida in December, I highly recommend going down to Miami. It's usually the first week, and you'll see a lot of amazing murals, paintings by amazing artists from all over the world that normally you don't get to see their work. You'll get to see it. It's amazing. Please go at some point in your life. Also, I've been fortunate enough to have my work in a couple museums in California, Indiana, and in Germany. As you can see here, this is a painting actually I had in Art Basel, the gentleman here, the Roman soldier. I had that in there about 2013, and that actually did really well. Sold that painting that year. You can see the picture above it is the display wall that it was on, and it was at Scope. Scope is like I was saying before, it's a huge art fair, and they typically, it's like a one big tent that has maybe, I don't know, I'm gonna say 60 to 100 different galleries in it, and they all exhibit their own collection of artists. So I'm lucky to work with a gallery out of California called ThinkSpace. And typically in the space, they usually have about 4 or 5 different sections. They'll have some sections for a specific artist that they're working with, that they're trying to highlight, and then they have one main wall, which they'll usually do about anywhere from 60 to 100 of these small, square pieces. So they're usually 12 by 12, and that's what I did that year. So, all right, so this is my first project. It's called Beautiful Noise. It's a really satisfying project for me. It's something that I think as an artist, every now and then it's just you get really lucky, which is that I did this for ThinkSpace, for a show that was happening in Hawaii at the Honolulu Museum of Art. It was called Powwow Hawaii. It's a really cool event where they have a lot of artists come out, they do murals, and have lots of really cool, amazing art shows throughout the time that it's there. So this was also curated by ThinkSpace Gallery. And so one of the cool things about, like I said, sometimes as an artist, I really believe that one of your strengths to creating is your process. So for me, my process really kind of helped me out with this piece. The original concept came from a sketch I was doing for a Fluid Friday workshop that we used to have here on campus. So the sketch on the left there, the big beetle face right there, was my original sketch. And I liked that, thought it was pretty cool. I think it looks good. But I realized for what I wanted it for, it just was not gonna work. So although I did realize that I liked it and I wanted to do something with it, it just wasn't appropriate for what I was gonna use it for currently. So I did another sketch. And this sketch on the right is what I ended up with. And this was for a project, like I said, that I was doing here at a Fluid Friday workshop, and that I eventually turned it into a book cover illustration for Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. I don't know if you guys have ever read that book, but it's a pretty amazing book, and where Franz Kafka talks about a guy who wakes up one day and he thinks that he's a book. So it's pretty interesting in the way that it's written. I've always been fascinated with the visual part of how it's told, so I really kind of wanted to do a really cool illustration for it, because I have never seen a cover that I really liked, in terms of the book. So the sketch, like I said, it derived from that original one on the left and then turned into this one on the right. And that was all started probably about 4 or 5 years earlier, when I had done some similar sketches of something like this, where I had a portrait, I had some insects, I had some stuff that I really liked, I felt looked good together, and I wanted to kind of pursue, but not at that time. And the other part of my motivation was to put in, or inspiration, I should say, was to put in a monogram. So like as I said, as an illustrator, I have all these visual skills, but I wanted to kind of highlight a little bit more of my ability to use type, and design something that had a little bit more relevancy to the concept of just an illustration, all right? So let's take a look at how this evolved, all right? So on the left there, you see I have my original sketch there for this piece, and then down below, I have a monogram, which I worked on. Essentially, I just scan this stuff in from my sketchbook, and then from there, I will composite it into the composition that I want to use eventually. So as you can see here, that M in my sketch looks nothing like the M that's in the final, and that's the beauty of Photoshop, right? Because I could take it in, scan it, realize, hey, you know what? I don't like these proportions. This is not working. And I changed it, I manipulated it. So then when I go to paint it, it's all brand new, I'm not fixing anything while I'm working on it, and that's the idea. So the illustration in the middle is the final. This is a acrylic painting on paper. It was actually the first time I've actually used this technique, and it was very pleasing, actually, because I didn't realize that with this specific paper, it would give me the amount of freedom that it did give me. So it was great. It was actually a bonus. So the final here, like I said, after working up the colors and scanning it in, I could use it in the in InDesign. That's how I put together the final composition for the book cover. And so, like I was saying before, it's like this ability to have, when I do my sketches, I just usually do a ton of sketches. Sometimes I nail them down maybe in 2 or 3. Sometimes it might take a little bit more. Fortunately, I only had to do 2. And as you saw in the previous image, it was just a head, right? So I eventually wanted it to turn into something a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more exciting. So obviously I turned it into this like bug warrior. And a lot of my design inspirations sometimes come from different things. So it's a lot of texture, lots of colors, lots of patterns. I like them from all different styles, like I said, to geometric, to organic, to Art Nouveau, to illustrative styles, to more realistic styles. And a lot of times I like to mix them all together. So this is an acanthus leaf, and I really love the pattern and the way that it moves. I think it's very subtle. It has a very, like I said, very geometric but very soft pattern. And I think it complements this kind of really, naturally aggressive creature or person that I've made, right? So I'm going to show you the final. All right. Now, don't get caught up in the final yet. See, all the way over there to the left, that's my painting. Yeah, this is a picture from the Honolulu Museum of Art. Obviously, I wasn't able to make the opening. But, yeah, don't get caught up with the little sculpture there. That's pretty awesome. But, yeah, that's the only picture I could find of the actual piece at the exhibition. So there it is. But now we can look at the final, right? It's pretty exciting. I think this was something that I guess, again, that was a plus for me because after experimenting with the paper on the first project I showed you, it gave me a lot of freedom. It gave me an ability to work faster and get some different type of textural things that I wanted to get. But ultimately, like I said, it was speed. And I think that ultimately, as a creative person, is something that you're trying to get better at constantly, is your time management, right? So I can remember when I first started out, it used to take me a really, really long time to make stuff. And it's just, that wasn't conducive to making money. You know what I mean? That's not how it works. I didn't want my quality to dip, but I definitely wanted to get better and faster. So, exploring different mediums helps. I mean, I started out, like I said, like with all the dry mediums, pencil, charcoal, and eventually use color pencil, and eventually you move up to watercolor, gouache, tempera, acrylic, oil, and that's usually your chart right there for traditional mediums. And they can all take a varying, different amount of time to execute. Like I said, and when you can do something a lot faster and get great results, it's just a bonus, So, on to my next project. This is called Kaleidoskull, and I do this with a buddy of mine who's from San Diego. His name is Monty Montgomery. And here are the pieces that we do together. We've had 2 shows, the first one being here at Redefine Gallery, downtown Orlando, if you guys have been to the City Arts Project. It's actually run by a good friend and colleague here named Steve Parker, who works over in computer animation. And we had an opportunity to have our first exhibition there, which was really amazing. As you can see, our combination of work is something that I actually personally enjoy a lot these days because it kind of frees up the amount of work that I have to do. And sharing it with somebody that has likewise visual appreciation, for some of the things that I like. I love geometry, like I said, I love patterns, and these are things that, I would probably normally do, but not to this extent. And so collaborating with someone else is very satisfying, put it that way. So it's kind of an exploration of fantasy and design together. As recently, I just started doing some griffins. I'm half Greek, so my last name, Filippo. So I've always been kind of fascinated with Greek mythology, and I've always wanted to do pieces using Greek mythological creatures. And as I said before, when I went to school, I was really into my drawing classes. I took anatomy, advanced anatomy, so seeing creatures and insects, and as you can see in my work, combining different animals and different things is something that's really up my wheelhouse. It's something that gives me great pleasure to execute in terms of what I'm trying to communicate. And we spent a lot of time working on our process and how to combine the separate mediums we work in. So on a couple of these here, they're acrylic that I've painted in, and then he goes in later. Actually, this one's pretty interesting here, this girl right here with the blue skull. That actually came to me with all of his stuff painted on it, and then I had to go on top of it and then paint and do the background, which was really, really, really challenging. Normally, I don't do that. Normally, I start from the back and build my way up. So the second time around, we actually did it very different. So with these griffins, I actually painted the griffins first, and then I sent them all the way to San Diego, and then he masked out around them. So he had to sit there with an X-Acto knife and cut around my painting, and then spray paint them. So this is a very kind of stressful and anxious period for me and my buddy Monty, because if you've never done anything like this before, typically I can spend anywhere between a couple weeks to a month on a painting, right? And only to know that I can send it away and it may never look the same again. Right? I got to chalk it up to, hey, that's just a learning curve, right? Because that's what we're doing. But so far, so good. No mistakes. We've actually enjoyed very good sales so far. Literally, we've sold just about everything we've made. So that's great. Here's a pic from August. We had an exhibition at Sparks Gallery in San Diego, downtown Gaslamp Quarter. And these were part of that series I'm currently doing on the Griffins. So I believe one of those, that one that's close to me right there, right off my right shoulder, that piece we sold in that exhibition. And I think, we actually sold the one behind Monty there not too long ago, so there's 2 left. And so I'll get into a little bit about that process that I was just talking about. So essentially, like I said, I started my moleskin, and that's probably, I don't know, that's a small drawing, maybe like 8 by 5, 8 by 6, something like that, my sketchbook. So I start there, do a couple studies. If I like them, I scan them in. And then, as you see in that bottom left corner there, there's the painting, and then you can see off the corner there's another piece of paper, which you might not be able to tell, but there's some red lines traced over with black lines. And so that's how I actually transfer my drawing to the panel. So, this small drawing can't fit onto that big panel unless I make something, right, to transfer it at that size to keep those proportions. So that's what I do. I scan in my drawings that are really tiny and small or at a good size, and then I transfer them to the panel. Like I said, I put them in Photoshop, blow them up, transfer them, and now that's 14 by 14. So that's a pretty big panel. I start out with a base layer of a color so I can get my mid-tone established. And then from there, I just build up all the subsequent layers above it, trying to bring some depth and highlight to it so that the eye can relate to some of the features of the form. So, and then I sent that out to Monty. And this is what Monty did. Like I said, he sits there, he has to tape out everything, go over, cut around my painting, which is, right? Hope that works out. But ultimately, I think he does a great job. I think he's shown, especially myself, over the last year, that the work we do is just really going in a great direction. I'm very pleased with how everything's turned out. And this piece right here is called Siberian Griffin. It is, like I said, it's 14 by 14 inches. It's oil and aerosol on a wood panel. We did this for an online show set up by wowxwow.com, and they're based out of Scotland. They do pretty big shows with a bunch of different artists from around the world, and it was great. Within less than a week of it being up on the site, we sold it, so it's just great. And this is from our first show here in Orlando. I'm really pleased with how our first mural came out together. As you can see here, some of the drawings, my study drawings, I sell those as well. Now, after doing this for so many years, I used to just do my drawings, leave them in a sketchbook, and then I would just sell the painting. But after doing it for this many years, I've realized that's extra work. I could sell those too. And it's probably my best skill, drawing, hands down. So usually at the show, I will sell my studies. And as you can see here, there's about 4, right? About 4 out of those that sold. Those, actually, out of all my drawings, I think every single one sold except for like 2, which is great, because it's double work for me, you know? Because if I just sell the paintings, you know, that's fine, but that can only generate so much income, right? But if I'm able to generate more income with my drawings, even better, right? Bonus for me. Like I said, and these are small. They're usually like, I don't know, these are 5x7 frames, so they're all pretty tiny, those right there. And then this is the final exhibition, how it looked up on the wall. And I believe Steve took the shot, the gallery director, and I'm actually very, very pleased with it. I think it's extremely hard to get a good photo of your work sometimes at a gallery, and let alone so symmetrical. So yeah, we sold every piece there except for, I would say, maybe 2. Yeah, I think so. So it was a very successful show. All right, and so for my final project, I'm going to talk about a mural that I did here in Orlando this year. A good buddy of mine that I've known since high school has a great juice shop out in College Park called Grounding Roots, and they had a wall. He said, "Hey, want to come paint it?" Sure, I'll come paint it. I'll pay me, right? Yeah, cool. I'll do it. So initially, you know, the plaza there is more about, I guess, health and wellness, because it's a, you know, he has a juice shop and there's some other things there. But, you know, I didn't essentially want to do something that was very direct. Like, I didn't want to do signage or something that's just says Grounding Roots or anything like that. And I told him, you know, it's going to definitely be something inspiring, an art piece that people in the community should love and feel good about seeing on a day-to-day basis, you know. So my concept was loosely based around this visual metaphor for positive self-esteem, which is that if you feel good, you look good, right? I wanted also, because I had a daughter last year, I wanted to make something that my community, my daughter, could see and feel good about. You know, pretty simple. I think most people, when they see artwork, have a connection to it or they don't. It's pretty simple. It's either you see something you like, you know you like it, you want to continue to look at it, see something you don't like, you stop. And so I wanted it to be something that lasted a while. It's something that had somewhat significant importance to me and others, but also could be enjoyed by a large community. And so, as I said, initially, I had this sketch here on the left, and I was thinking of this kind of really powerful, emboldened woman who exudes strength and confidence, but beauty as well. You know, that's why she has the sword, just in case, you know, she gets into some beef. But when I was doing some of these mock-ups and I presented it to him, I could see that my figure would probably get lost in this wall. I mean, you're going to see, I mean, there's some hedges there, so part of my composition gets chopped. So if you're seeing it from the street, you would only see about like 2/3 of it. So it caused me to rearrange my composition. So, you know, luckily, you know, being, like I said, now that I have this process of taking my work and going in and then scanning it and then being able to manipulate it, I was able to do something else with it, right? So I took the upper portion of this drawing and just made it bigger. And I felt like that was more successful, and it definitely helped with the composition. And then to your right, you see this is just my, I guess, like my comp for them, just kind of see how it would look on the wall. So it has the pattern. These are not the colors that I actually use, just so in case anybody's wondering. But this is how I presented it to them so that they can at least get a visual of what it would look like upon completion. All right, so I'm going to play a video for you. This is my time lapse, I guess, of 3 months worth of work. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Building dreams, we're building dreams. just keep dancing till the music stops. Building dreams, we're building dreams. You think you really want it, you know that you don't. You think you really want it, but you know that you don't. You think you really want it, you know that you don't. You know that you don't. You say you will be sorry, I know that I won't. You say you will be sorry, but I know that I won't. You say you will be sorry, I know that I won't. I'm coming down, coming down. I'm gonna fetch you from the underworld. I'll bring you back, I'll bring you back.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. So thanks for coming out. I appreciate you guys coming out this morning to look at the Instructor Showcase. Really do. Here's some of my contact information. So you got my website, my Instagram, and my email. Also, there is the Kaleidoscope Art website as well. So you guys take a. You're not supposed to take pictures, but if you do, you'll have that information. So I also have the great pleasure of introducing the next instructor, Dan, the Man, Walker.
Thank you, sir. How you doing, guys? What happened to the front row? What'd you guys do with them? So yes, my name is Dan Walker. I actually go by Lieutenant Dan. About 25 years ago, I had a friend of mine. She gave me the nickname, and it kind of stuck, and a student found out about it, and it just kind of carried over. I do want to say hi to the online people. You guys didn't do that. And I got a friend out there, Haley Hunter. I want to show you that I do own a pair of socks. See? I do. Anyway, I have been at Full Sail on and off. It's going on, I think, 18 years. I call them tour of duties. My first tour was back in the early 90s, before the digital media program actually started. I taught a small little class for the film and audio guys with a program called Freehand. And I was teaching them how to basically visualize their resumes and teach them how to do their own personal branding. So with that being said, do you guys see that really ugly logo up there? So when Peter asked us to do this presentation, I didn't have a logo. In fact, I have never had a logo. I've been doing this work now for over, going on 27 years, and I've never had my own logo. So last night, I said, I need to make a logo. Because I followed his directions on this presentation to the letter, except for the logo. So I said, well, I don't know how to make a logo. I'm a video guy. So I started thinking to myself, okay, what do I like? I like wood. Wood is organic, it's got different textures, and I love metal, okay? I am now a fan of the show called Forged in Fire. Anybody ever heard of it? Where you make knives and swords. I love it. So now I'm converting my garage into a forged empire. Anyway, so if anybody wants to design me a logo, we can talk after this, because like I said, I just kind of threw it together. So this is my family. I have a very chaotic life. I have two teenagers. I have a 17 and a 15-year-old. And my 80-year-old mother just moved in with me. She is more trouble than they are. She really is. I know more about Medicare and supplemental insurance than I ever care to know about. And that's my dog, Chloe and Lucy. And yeah, so along with teaching, I'm helping them kind of figure out their world. They both my kids, my daughter is doing exactly what I'm doing. She's in high school and middle school. They both went to a magnet visual arts school. So they were able to tap into their visual passions and desires. So she does editing and video. My son does more textile. He's more of a hands-on. He likes to do clay. And He does his own sculpting. He's creating his own Halloween masks, and he watches that show Face Off. You guys ever seen that show? So and he loves it. So I've had to go out and buy all this material for him, and clay and foam, latex, all this stuff. So he's out there doing it. Hopefully they'll both continue doing that. I mean, I didn't have, when I was in high school, I didn't have the nearly the outlets that they do as far as raise a hand. How many of you guys knew what you wanted to do when you were in high school? 3, 4, 5? All right, there's many of you, actually. This light is really bad. Anyway, so my dad, who you don't see in here, he passed away in 2012. And he told me, he was an engineer. Everybody knows engineers they're very dry. He told me, he says, what are you doing being a teacher? I said, what do you mean? I love teaching. This was back when I was doing my first tour. And he goes, don't you know that those who do well, those who don't teach? And I was like, damn, that was harsh. And I said, okay. I said, I will give you that, but I love teaching. But I realized that I was only 26 when I was here the first time. And I really didn't have a lot to offer my students. So I guess he kind of got in my head, and I went to go do. So I left. And I went to go work for a theme park design company. And I started to kind of hone my craft and just do. And back in 2009, I started having that urge to teach again. And I thought to myself, I can find the balance. I can do and teach. And that's what I do. So not only do I teach, but I'm also working in the industry on a regular basis. So this kind of brings me to my next area, and that is, I don't have a website. You also saw me that I didn't have a logo, but I have connections. I network with people. I work with friends. But lately, as of 2013, I had a life-altering experience. My wife passed away suddenly, and I had to figure out. I had 2 kids I got to raise, and I got to figure out what's my next move. And as part of the grieving process, and let me tell you, going to those grieving counselors, so I had to figure out my own method of grieving. And so I said, well, what do I love to do? I love teaching, but I also love to collaborate, and I love to volunteer. So I threw myself volunteering at my kids' schools. I would do these things called teacher takeovers, where I would come in, of course with permission, and take over the class. And I would bring a camera and a green screen, and we would get the kids to just mess around in the green screen, and we would have fun for the day. But then I wanted more. It started becoming very infectious. So I ran into a guy at UCF who was running a company called Earthrise, and he was building a rover you guys ever heard of the Google Lunar Challenge? So Google will give anybody $30 million if you land a rover on the moon, if it sends back a video and a text message. Not too hard, right? Sure. So this guy, he's like, I'm doing the challenge. So he had a bunch of UCF engineers, astrophysics students helping him. But he needed kind of crowdsourcing funds to build the rover. So I ran into him, and he's like, hey, can you help me? I said, sure. He says, can you bring a couple students, and we can do some videos, some promos? I'm like, okay. I brought 30 students with me. And I said, okay, the only thing that we want, and we talked about this as students, the only thing we want is we want our names on the rover. So he's like, done. So they etched everybody's name in the rover, okay? Now, the rover hasn't taken off yet. And all those students that are now long gone, and every so often I'll get an email, when is the launch? And I just keep saying, it's coming soon, I promise you. The challenge that Ruben has is getting space for his rover on a rocket, okay? Now, I want you guys to remember that right there. We're going to come back to that in a little bit, okay? So then I started thinking to myself, how do I start paying forward? I mean, I've had a pretty good career. I'm not done yet, but I mean, I've had a pretty good career. And I wanted to start collaborating with students, graduates at Full Sail. So this first one, Disney does this think tank once a year with their management, upper management. They get 50 of all their managements. They team them up in pairs of 2. And they have to come up with crazy ideas on what we could do or what they could do to expand their park. If it's a service or if it's another theme park ride or an attraction. So a buddy of mine called me. He's upper management. I've never had to pay for Disney before, which is really cool. And he says, hey, he goes, we're doing this think tank and we want to hire you to do an animation for me. Well, I was really busy at the time and I said, I'd love to do it with you. And I never say no. That's the one thing, I never say no. I will find somebody to cover for me, whatever it is. So I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. Well, Christopher Hess, who had just graduated, and he and I were talking, he's like, hey, give me your contact information and we'll work with you. And he was moving up to South Carolina. And I called him up, I'm like, hey, are you situated yet? He goes, I don't even have internet. I'm like, okay, well, you have your laptop, right? He's like, yeah. I said, all right, well, I'm FedExing you a hard drive tomorrow with some assets. And we worked together on this 4 days, okay? It took us 4 days. I paid him $500 for the 4 days. That's all the budget they had. And so here is, it's basically the concept was they want to do a kind of like a extreme sports park in somewhere near ESPN. So they won 3rd place, and it's on the short list. So hopefully, in the near future, we can see an extreme sports park over there. So this next one, I do a lot of commercials, shooting, editing, motion graphics, and I teach motion graphics here on campus as well. And I collaborated with John Flynn, who used to be a photography teacher here, but he owns his own post company. And he said, hey, we need, I have this client in New York. He doesn't want to pay the outrageous New York prices, so he wants to come down here in Florida and shoot a commercial. So he got Omar Martinez involved. You get Omar? He got him involved in doing some of these storyboards, and that kind of kicked off the project. And I was working with him for another project, and he says, hey, would you like to do the editing and the photography and shooting? And I said, yes, but I'm busy. I could tell John, I was like, I'm busy, but I will. And I said, but let's find somebody to be the DP for this. So we did. And I had just heard some rumblings of a film grad that just graduated that was really good. And his name was Christy Jesus. And I saw some of his work, and I said, hey, you want to make some money? And he's like, sure. I said, so I gave him the storyboards, and he he looked at it, and we started to plan. We had a $100,000 budget, which, seems like a lot of money, but when you're shooting commercials, it really isn't, because you got to rent the gear and you have to get the lights and actors, and we did casting calls and everything. The catch was that this was going to be filmed here in a soundstage, but it needed to look like it was up north, cold. Go figure. So I'm going to show you guys, and the concept was that JDS Jewelers is your family jeweler, and you're going to start off with an engagement ring, and then you're going to start off with an anniversary, and then maybe a don't die ring. I don't know. But you keep it in the family, and we're your family jeweler. So we struggled to find actors that kind of would look the same as they aged. So what we did as best we could. So the music is the same because it all got tied together. You're going to see Julio Lima, who owns Speak Out Loud agency, let us use his soundstage. Well, he didn't let us. He charged us. So when we built all the sets, John's wife, who was amazing, she went out and bought everything, and then when we were done, she went and returned everything. So even the jewelry, it was real jewelry. She bought it and then returned it. So here is the soundstage, and showing, we have the green screen in the back room, and all the props. I have that painting up there now. I just took it. So here's the first one.
Unwrap your memories this holiday season. JDS, your private jeweler since 1955.
Kind of like the New York version of He Went to Jared's, right? Now, the second one we did, and we actually had to build, they wanted a reflection of the people coming over to look at the, so we built this huge window pane. John still has it in his garage. We don't know what to do with it, so if anybody is in need of a huge window pane that is not tempered glass, and if you break, I'm sure you'll die, we have one. So here's the second one.
Unwrap your memories this holiday season. JDS, your private jeweler since 1955.
Now the last one, and this was a long day. I mean, we were there for one day, and we did 3 different shoots. We had a light catch on fire. We had one of our grips, he picked up the wrong wrap, and it had peanut butter, and we had to use an EpiPen on him. So there's drama that happens all the time in sound stages. I mean, it's crazy. But it all got, we met our deadline, and everything was great. He's okay.
Unwrap your memories this holiday season. JDS, your private jeweler since 1955.
So John did a really cool thing for me, because that invoice was very, very fat. And we split it, one in 2013 and one in 2014. So my tax guy was really nice to me that year. That was really cool. While we were editing the JDS, I would work at John's house. He has a studio at home. And John would have this knack for reading his emails out loud. I was like, okay. So I'd be sitting there editing, and he'd be reading his emails. And so Julio Lima emailed him and said, hey, we just landed the Orlando City Lions contract to do the rebrand for them. Would you like to help? Because we don't do motion or animation. And so I just started talking. I was like, man, how cool would it be if the lion like consumed the players and the fans and just kind of went through them? And well, John's got the quietest keyboard you've ever known, and he was typing all that to Julio while I was explaining it to him. I was just talking. And Julio's like, that's great, let's do it. And John's like, we got the job. I'm like, what do you mean we got the job? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, when's it due? He goes, we have 30 days. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna need some help. So we started looking at who could help us. And we have a endless amount of talent here at Full Sail. And we started bringing on some people to help us. So we first started getting into figuring out what was the whole idea behind the concept that I came up with that he just kind of wrote of, getting the line, and they kept coming back to us and saying, no, we want the line to be more mechanical, less organic. So we're like, okay. We kept sketching, kept drawing. It kept getting closer, and we finally came to a conclusion that it was going to be a robotic-looking lion. Then we started to, kind of hash out how the lion was going to come into the fans and the players. And then we hired George to use ZBrush to start creating the lion. And it looked very snake-like. And we're like, George, this looks like a snake. And he's like, okay, I'll try again. So he tried his second attempt, and I'm like, George, this looks like a hippopotamus. But he's still very talented. We just needed something more mechanical. So then we brought Nate Phillips on board. And by the way, Nate is he's in the hospital, so I want to wish you a speedy recovery. And Nate started going into Cinema 4D and started to model this lion. And they were very happy with it. The problem is that Julio and Orlando City was chomping at the bit for us to get collateral for them, marketing collateral for them to start spreading this around town. So we started to create the print pieces first while we were trying to figure out the animation. So we brought every character, we brought every player in the green screen, and we shot them in stills and video. And then we did billboards. And they went up all over town. I mean, literally, this town was purple for like a month. And this was the end result of the line, which we brought Corey Martin on board to do a lot of the particle and the glow in After Effects. We even got a bus wrap, which was really cool. We did some test shots of the fans in really slow-mo, 120 frames. We tried green screen. It didn't really work. So we went back to, okay, let's just keep them on black. This was some test animations we did before we had Corey do the particles. And that was the end result of the animation of the first one. And then we went into how the lion was going to come into and come out. John's son at the time was 6, and we actually gave him the job of the lion roar right up until we actually aired these on TV. And I said, John, you're going to have to break it to your son that his roar is not going to make it on TV. It was not a good day. So those are the 3 projects that I collaborated with graduates. Corey Martin actually just got a job offer. He actually leaves next week to be the senior motion designer for Pandora Radio. So he's moving to Atlanta next week. really proud of him. He's been working for Digital Brew for the last couple years. Another great company. So my current adventures and what keeps me busy, other than my mom, is I ran into a guy a couple years ago. Actually, it was 2012, actually, at NAB. His name was Ed Bookbinder. He owned a company called Visual Impact Communications. And I found out that it was the very first videography company here in town. So he started shooting video back in the 1920s. No, I'm just kidding. It was probably 1970s. So it was all VHS tape. And I started talking to him, and I said, hey, if you ever need help with any of your projects, let me know. And he's like, well, I have a really good editor right now, but thank you. And off we went. Every couple of months, I would send him an email, and I would say, hey, you need any help? He's like, no, I'm good. Okay. 6 months later, we go by, and I'd ask him again. And then one day, I get the call from Ed. Ed's like, hey, I need your help. I'm like, all right, sure. So his company runs mainly video. We do a lot of day in the life videos. We try to pull the heartstrings of the jury so that Dan Newland and John Morgan can get their money. Video depositions. And I've added something new to his website, which is we're now creating some accident reenactment animation, which, of course, none of it's admissible in court. But, it's good eye candy for the jury. And corporate videos, of course. So we started getting really busy. So I hired my first 2 employees, and I nicknamed them Bread and Butter. Okay? These guys are very demanding. Okay? They work every day. Even if I'm not working, I find somebody to watch them so they can work. And usually it's in video deposition work, which I have to say, it's bread and butter. And that's what their names are. So let me show you guys a couple examples of the 2D and 3D animation for accident reenactment. A lot of people don't know this, that when I was younger, I wanted to be a police officer. And my wife said no. She found an application in my dresser for the state highway patrol, and she's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Nothing. It's empty. It's not even filled out." So it's kind of cool that I now get to. And I don't wear a badge, but I get to go get the police report. I get to go to the accident area. I get to take pictures. I get to, try to have a voice for the injured, and so forth and so on. So here's just some quick examples of, and they vary based on, of course, cost. Some of them I take the imagery from Google Maps, and then I animate on top of them. Others are full-on animations. So there were no children in that bus when that got hit, just to let you know. It was just the bus driver and the monitor person, I guess. But anyway, the guy who was driving the dump truck had a heart attack, and so it happens. So currently, I've been hired to do some freelance for SpaceX. I wish I could tell you guys about it. I really do. But right now, it's all internal stuff, and I'm hoping that eventually they'll release it to me so I can share it. So, sorry. You guys know this place? Zachley's? You don't know Zachley's? So, just to kind of give you a little history of Zachley's. I taught Zach back in 1996. And he was here as an audio student, and then he went on to do the first entertainment business degree. And one of his first projects was doing a business plan for something that he was passionate about. Well, we used to have this roach coach here in the back lot, Bernie's roach coach, and we all got sick one day. So his passion changed. And he's like, I want to build a cafe here on campus so that we don't ever have to go through that ever again. And that's where Zachley's came to be. So, you know, he and I joke around and this and that, and he's like, hey, he goes, I'm having Platinum Creative do a rebrand for me. He goes, do you think maybe your students can do some promos that we can play on the screens? I said, yeah. So I have last month's class and this month's class. They are feverishly working to get the promos done so that we can test them once he puts his new panels up. And you guys will see some of their work, which is really cool. Now, I know he said something about free pizza for them. I'm going to try. One of the students like, life for life, right? I'm like, I don't think it's for life, at least maybe for the time you're here. So that's why I'm kind of waiting for the students to kind of get closer to graduation. So it's not so. I'm just kidding. So this is my reel. The stuff that's in here, I didn't put any of the collaboration stuff in there because a lot of that stuff I did more producing than I did actual editing. But this is all stuff that I've produced, edited, animated. And it's, I know Tony took up a lot of my time, so I don't have a lot of time to finish talking. But here's the reel. Hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you. So real quick, on that last Mummy Returns, I was charged with creating an animation floor plan for the building that was already there. And most roller coaster rides are anywhere between 7 and 9 minutes long. And when I did the animation, I was coming up short. I was only about 4 minutes. And my son, who at the time was 7, he just walked by and goes, Dad, make it go backwards. I was like, yes, I'm going to make that roller coaster go backwards. And sometimes it just takes somebody else to think out of the box for you. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. And the guys online, thank you for tuning in. Before I go, I have placed 3 pieces of paper randomly in the audience. The paper is underneath your desk. If you get one of these pieces of paper, I will collaborate with you on a project. You found gum. I didn't put gum. Now, we have some empty chairs, so you might want to go look, because I didn't actually put them there. Somebody else did, so keep looking. You got one? Awesome. You got another one? All right, we got one more. Oh, that's awesome. So I'll get with you guys after this, okay? And we can talk about your skill sets. So again, thank you guys so much. I'd like to bring everybody else back out, Kira and Tony and Peter.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all for coming. Let's give these instructors another round of applause. Great job. I want to thank you guys for coming and spending your time and sharing your work to inspire students. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day.